happy rookie tournament and prospect challenge weekend. We'll discuss that during the show. We have a number of things to discuss, but we'll start with our pre-show. We'll start with the NFL, and we'll start with what I consider the joke that the NFL has been the last couple of years. I know the ratings keep going up. I don't know why. And after you watched the game last night where it was a cacophony of errors and bad plays. Russ, I've never seen a first down and 40 before. Well, I saw
no. First and 40 was pretty awful. Aaron Rodgers' best play was a broken play other than like the 2 or 3 shuttle passes he threw out of sheer desperation because he's that good. Everything was breaking down around him. Same with Trubisky, and Trubisky didn't throw anything over 10 yards. We might as well have been watching football from 100 years ago with the I formation and guys like Sid Luckman. I would have been happier seeing that because those guys might have scored a couple of touchdowns running the ball. This game was so bad. You couldn't have called it a good defensive battle. Even the announcers were struggling. Collinsworth and Al Michaels were struggling to say it was anything other than a bad game.
I mean, I think Chicago's defense played well, but you could tell, and I said this to you this morning, this is a product of the fact that the NFL, a lot of NFL teams, especially the Packers with a veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, didn't play most of their offense, most of their key offensive players at all during the preseason. I mean, you're talking players sat out every game or most every. It wasn't that they played a quarter. They didn't even. Some of them didn't even do that. Right. And I understand that point of view because you don't want these players to get hurt in a meaningless preseason game. But there has to be a balance. And last night, really, it was gross and mass incompetence the way things were going.
Well, that's why I'm expecting a little more like out of the Jets Bills because those teams at least played their starters. The Jets didn't play Bell, but they played everybody else.
Right.
And I know the Bills were playing their guys. And even though they didn't play a lot, they played and they got on the field together and they at least got to play together and not these two teams, these players look like they never played together before. The other underlying thing from that game was, Matt LaFleur is the head coach and he calls the plays. You have Aaron Rodgers who can be a bit of a jerk at quarterback. There's already a clash there. Don't you sense that?
Yeah, I mean,
there was talk about it preseason.
Yeah, there was talk about it during the preseason, and it's like, okay, couldn't you? I mean, the reason that McCarthy got fired was because there was heat between him and Aaron Rodgers. Couldn't you have hired somebody who would have been more amenable to Rodgers? I mean, you're going to get 2 or 3 more good years out of him before he starts to break down. If you're lucky, knock on wood. You should get somebody who sort of not caters to him, not like kowtows to him, but somebody who can get along with him and somebody who can win. And I mean, this is a first-time coach.
You know what would have been funny? If they would have been like, hey, here's your offensive coordinator. He's going to call all the plays. It's Brett Favre. The guy who wouldn't talk to you when you were his backup.
Oh, my God. No, the problem is that the offensive coordinator would want to come in the second half and take over.
Right.
So
that's true.
Yeah. Now I just have to touch on this one more time because we talked about it a little bit yesterday. What happened after our show when it came to Antonio Brown is pretty much it's a complete joke. The fact that the Raiders, that Gruden and Mike Mayock came out after, apparently Mayock and Antonio Brown had a confrontation on the field where
close to a fist fight is what we're.
Fist fight, punted the ball. I don't know if he punted it at Mayock or punted it away from him and said, "Find that," and all this stuff. I mean, and then the thing is, they came out and they said, "We're going to suspend him." Why going to? Just suspend him. What are you waiting for? I mean,
one player right then and there, he is suspended. The interesting thing is I would have done a slow clap and said, hey, that's more activity than you did this whole preseason anyhow. So, I mean, at this point, he's not playing in the first game. Drew Rosenhaus was interviewing everywhere saying he is going to be the guy to fix this, the conduit. He is the same guy that had his client Terrell Owens doing push-ups in a driveway, feeding the media pizza while he was at odds with his team. So I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus will get this one squared away.
So,
no, it's okay. I say that cleanly.
Yeah, no, and I'm scrambling here because of course I sent the link in the instant message on Twitter to you and Anthony, and didn't send it to our buddy.
Jan, he's gonna be mad.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jan. There's the link, so he'll be coming in hot. So yeah, I mean, and honestly, I have to say this before we get started. If there was anything else on TV last night, anything, I was watching Beat Bobby Flay instead of the.
I know this game was like a movie that you keep watching. You say it's got to get better than this. It has to, and it just never did.
Yeah, no, it's really bad. And hold on a second.
I do have one other thing. So, in a minor league baseball game, and I can't tell you the team or the player.
Okay.
I hit a home run. He did his up to the sky thing, goes by home plate, never touches home plate.
Oh, Jesus.
So then, of course, the catcher is like, and he goes to the umpire, peel play, could I have the ball? Touches home plate, and he goes, you're out.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, because that is emblematic of what it's like in all of baseball these days. And the fact that a guy's more worried about his celebration than actually touching the bases. I just laugh. And sorry, Jan, I erroneously sent the link into the direct message conversation with Anthony and Russ, and not the one was the whole bunch of us. So that's why I left you out there hanging for a few minutes. But no, I did. I mean, honestly, I start to get the feeling now with baseball that some of these records that are being broken with home runs, I mean, the Twins have 8 guys over 20 home runs. The Yankees have 13 guys with 10 or more home runs. A marginal relief pitcher, Michael Lorenzen, hits a home run, gets a win, and plays center field in a game for Cincinnati, and is the first guy to do that since Babe Ruth. I'm like, so what? I mean, the thing I was surprised about was that a relief pitcher was playing in the outfield. I wasn't sure if it was a thing where they were taking the relief pitcher out so they could put another reliever in, and then. Well, that's what, Davey Johnson did that with the
Roger McDowell game.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. But you know what I'm saying? It's like it's gotten to the point now where it seems like there's 6,000 home runs being hit in Major League Baseball that the home run is almost devalued. It's almost meaningless.
It's getting there.
Well, if you're doing that, then you got to roll back the entire steroid era and go with the same view. I mean,
I have done that for the steroid era.
There's no question that the ball is different this year, right? It's wound tighter. The seam, there's no lift to the seams, and that's where it reduces the drag. I mean, there's been evidence what's going on. I mean, my view on the whole steroid era is: look, paint the entire era with the same brush. Stop trying to single out individual players who are the ones who got caught, who are evidence, because for every one person like Bond, there's at least probably 50 relievers or somebody else who is doing it who didn't get caught. The entire era is painted with the same brush. Bud Selig and baseball clearly turned a blind eye to it, as evidenced by the Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, Chicks Dig the Long Ball commercials that went on. So everybody knew what was going on. They needed to restore baseball. And Cal Ripken's streak and the home run derby fight of Sosa and McGuire in '98 reinvigorated the entire sport. I mean, it's pretty clear that happened.
And the Yankees in the
but that was an answer, right? So if you look at the Yankees, though, they weren't built necessarily on the home run, right? That was especially '98 was a pure team. I mean, guys like Brocious and others.
I have a picture that I use once in a while in Sportsology. I was at the Hall of Fame where they had the setup where it was the Great American Home Run Chase, and every time I see that picture, I just laugh because it's Great American cheating. That's what it was.
And now every writer is attempting to impart their decision in terms of the voting, which we've seen the last several years. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, again, we've talked about this bunch. Does Clemens get in? Does Bonds get in?
I don't think they do.
May likely never get in. The question is whether or not he deserved it or not is another matter altogether. But Clemens and Bonds, you have to go back and figure if you're going to use steroids as the arbiter of whether or not they get in, when did they actually begin using it? Because if you believe Bonds only started after the Maguire and Sosa chase than his numbers were of the ilk he got in.
Yeah, I think Bonds will get in eventually.
And you can probably argue Clemens, though, if you look at the decline in his production in Toronto before he started juicing, there's a question as to whether or not he had done enough at that.
No, there's no question. You talk to his trainer, and there's no question.
There's a question as to whether or not he did enough before then.
Yeah, he did
on his numbers to get in.
He basically had the same numbers as Dwight Gooden before that.
Right, and he was declining in his last. Exactly. He was declining in his last couple years in Boston, and only when he started getting injected up in the ass from Brian McNamee in Toronto did he have his rebirth.
Right.
So all I know is this: I won a lithograph from the Fan 590 in Toronto back in the day, and it was a Roger Clemens Cy Young lithograph. It was the 200, of them signed. And that's in the garbage. I threw it out. So and not because he was a Blue Jay, but because I'm sorry, he's a disgrace. And the thing is, I have and this will be the last thing. The first photo I ever took at Yankee Stadium was of A-Rod hitting his 500th home run. It was a shot that actually like Yankee Steiner Collectibles got a hold of, and I got an autographed photo of my picture with A-Rod hitting the home run, with his bat in motion, with the ball going out. Me keeping that has nothing to do with A-Rod. It has to do with me being at Yankee Stadium for my first game. I would have much rather had it be Jeter's 3,000th hit than A-Rod's 500th home run. That's how strongly I feel about steroids. Sosa, Maguire, Bonds, Clemens,
Palmeiro,
no
friggin'
Andy Pettit.
Yeah, but you don't know. You don't know who didn't use it, first of all, right? So, you're labeling the players that we are aware of. So, again, I guess in your view, then Big Papi is clearly not getting it either.
He shouldn't, but he probably will, because everybody loves Big Papi in spite of it. That's why. I think.
And if A-Rod had a better PR group, everybody would have loved A-Rod also, and he just basically didn't know how to communicate until way too late.
And I think Pettit has a chance because he fessed up. Because he confessed.
The first time, not the second time. Then they reminded him, and then he confessed the second time.
Okay. Right.
But he did confess.
He did.
I'm not, again, but then technically, if you believe, so did A-Rod.
Okay.
Again, if you're going to use that logic, he didn't expressly say it, but it's very clear he fairly admitted that he did it.
Right, and Bonzo would put cream on his knee. Got it.
Right. The clear. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, September 6th, 2019.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Michael Lagello, and this is Tang Friday here in Buffalo, New York, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. That is, of course, that means I have a cold because the weather has changed in Buffalo.
Or there's been a moon landing.
It's changed down in lower New York also there, Mike. I can tell you that. It's definitely cooler down here.
Hey, based on the movie, Russ, that means they should call me the first man because I'm drinking Tang.
You're the first something, all right.
Yeah, there you go.
And hopefully the last.
Okay, so excuse me. Okay, so a little bit of breaking news here as we were just going to air. Not monstrous news, but I think it has ramifications down the line. Jeremy Jacobs, the longtime owner of the Boston Bruins, announced via a article from Kevin Paul DuPont that he is handing over control of the Bruins and his sports empire to his 6 children. Now, he's, I believe, in his late 70s, Russ. I think he's.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. Now, but the thing that first popped to mind about this is, remember the role that Jeremy Jacobs played, the big role that he played in the 2012 negotiations of the CBA, and the lockout, and then eventually the deal that the NHL and Gary Bettman and Donald Fair had. Without him on the scene, without him heavily involved, I wonder what kind of ramifications that'll have for the new CBA.
Keep him as far away from negotiations as humanly possible. How about that? All he did was exacerbate a bad situation and make it worse. The more interesting part, I think, is obviously, look, we were starting to show about the Yankees, right? So the Yankees had the Steinbrenners, right? And there was questions of Hal and Hank and who was going to end up running the team. Mm-hmm. And finally ended up that kind of Hal was running the team. of the 6 children he has, which one of them stepped forward and kind of become the face of the organization from a day-to-day perspective? And are they going to be similar to their father, or are they going to take the lessons learned in terms of his negotiating skills and hopefully go slightly different to be a bit more conciliatory, for lack of a better term, in terms of the way they deal with the players, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I also think you're right by saying keep him away from negotiations. I think ultimately that's why you have Gary Bettman. He is the voice of all the owners. The owners should never pipe up and talk on their own when there's negotiations going on, because most of the time it's not going to help them. I think Dolan learned his lesson from that. So you're better off not saying anything. Jeremy Jacobs may disagree with us, but, I think right now you don't want to do it. And whether things are good or not, I know Jonathan Taves is telling people, on one hand, it's great because we're negotiating, so it looks good. And then, like what Peter said yesterday, made a lot of sense. We're just waiting for the curveball because they haven't said anything yet. They're waiting until like the 15th at midnight to say something. And it's like, that's the part that sort of gets me. And it's like, I don't even know what day of the week is the 15th. I don't even know.
It's a Sunday.
Sunday. It's a week from Sunday.
It's a Sunday. So are they going to wait until after the football games in between before the night game starts and then come out with something? They might. They just might.
Well, based on what the NHL did, I mean, their deadline, I think, was September the 1st, and they came out well before that and said that they weren't going to opt out. So I don't know if the PA is going to wait till the 11th hour to make, have some sort of dramatic announcement. I mean, the thing that's come out over the last few days is that there's optimism, and sometimes that's the word. Probably you hear that and you get your hopes up, and then all of a sudden the other shoe drops.
Right.
But I think that both sides do want labor peace. I just think that they also want some concessions on both sides. I think that the owners have enough in terms of things that they can give the players, and it's just a question of whether the players will give anything that the owners want. I think that, and it was mentioned, and don't know if it was the Pierre LeBrun piece, but there was another piece written on the current state of things, that there has to be a solution to the current RFA situation, Jan. I mean, right now, with these 10 guys who are still out there, if there was arbitration, and that was the thing that was mentioned, if there was arbitration after ELCs, then at least there would be something where these players would get a 1-year deal with, comparables, with an arbitration award, with an arbitrator deciding, and there wouldn't be holdouts until November and December. And I don't think that that's good for the players or for the league.
No, I agree. I mean, again, so my column last week, my blog last week, which I think I wrote last Saturday night, Sunday, I listed 5 different reasons why I thought the owners wouldn't opt out, and what I think are the players in terms of things that they're concerned about. So I had obviously the addition of Seattle adds money to the league, right? And that just helps the league, but that also factors in because, as you've heard all the conversations of hockey-related revenue, none of that goes to the players. All of that money goes into the pockets of the owners. Secondly,
correct, but
right, that's a huge deal, and because that's going to, I'll get into the next piece of it. The TV deal is up for renewal in 21, so that's also the year where Seattle starts. So we also have heard that there is a ton of other interest besides what's going on right now in terms of NBC Sports. ESPN is rumored, especially with the ESPN Plus, to want to get back into hockey, which is also going to be more money and more revenue, which also has to be determined where that money goes. The escrow we've talked a lot about, right? And the players are very adamant. And if there is going to be a reason why they reopen the CBA, it's going to be the use of the escrow and how much money comes out of their own pockets associated from their contracts to fund the cap rise that's happened, which is restricted a bit this year, a lot less than we expected. It's 81.5 versus 83.
Right.
And then also, as you talked about, the RFA situation, they're going to have to figure that out and how they handle it, because you no longer have really the bridge deals anymore. You're going from A to Z with no stopping in between in terms of the deals. Yeah. Fourth, in my opinion, you have the use of the signing bonuses as a way to, be buyout proof, because if you roll it forward, it doesn't count against salary. It counts against the AAV, but it doesn't count against the salary from a buyout perspective. Mm-hmm. And then also what's going to happen with the World Cup and the Olympics. I mean, Ovechkin was very adamant that he wanted to play in the Olympics, but he backed off towards the end. but he was very clear that he wanted to play in the Olympics. And now it's very hard for the NHL to use China and the proximity to the U.S. being as an issue because they've set up an office in China and are trying to grow the game there. So I think all of these are factors that have to get considered in terms of the next CBA, which is why it wouldn't shock me if the players opt out, but the owners have clearly stated by them opting in and maintaining the current agreement, but also with the verbiage that Bettman used in there, that if they're going to opt out, the players are the ones who are going to look like the bad ones here and not the owners, because the owners are willing to keep the status quo.
I think that's true, and I'm not going to repeat anything I said yesterday about it because it gets boring. What I am going to talk about, though, is Torrey Krug saying on his next contract he'd be willing to take less to stay in Boston. With these negotiations going on right now, a player saying that is not a smart move.
Nope.
Yeah, that's the PA. The PA probably sent him an email or made a phone call to him saying "shut up," because that's the last thing they want to hear. They want these players to go out and make the most. I bet you the PA is waving pom poms right now for all these RFAs to break the bank with their next contracts.
Right, but the question is so it's a couple things. So first of all, should all of them break the bank, or should there be a tiered approach to be able to make this a bit more malleable for teams? So maybe you go to free agency a year earlier. Maybe you find a way to have a better bridge deal. If the salary had risen to $83 million as opposed to $81 million, there's a very good possibility you might have had some more of these players signed already because you had the extra $2 million to work with, and that's a key component here. And I think that's a factor that has to get. Well, a couple of things. So on Krug, you'd like to have a player want to stay. You want to have players create, I would say, dynasties, right? And this is one of those things. If you look at the NBA, the Larry Bird rule, where you have the ability to re-sign your own free agent, this is something that's got mentioned before. That may be something that's part of the future CBA as a way to kind of keep some of these teams together, as opposed to parts getting split apart because you can only afford to play one or two of them.
Yeah, just don't say it while the negotiations are going.
The timing is bad. The sentiment is good, right? Yeah. The sentiment is a really good one. It endears him to his teammates.
Sure.
It endears him to the fan base. And see, honestly, he's talking that, hey, I want to be a part of this organization. I don't want to have to go elsewhere to make.
He's not helping his whole constituency. That's the issue.
Right, exactly right. You're hurting the players to a certain extent, but they can also argue, hey, this is one guy. He also knows. We also don't know how much less he's willing to take in order to stay there.
Look, again, I always say Donald Fear and the PA have done a very good job, but it is so much easier to have 31 owners, now eventually 32 owners unite compared to 700-something players all being on the same page. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, and I mean the PA has some responsibility for the cap not going up because they didn't take the highest elevator that they could to get it up to 83. They want to maintain a bit of control. They want to keep the percentage of escrow down this year, next year, before that new television contract comes into effect. And I get that, but the problem here is that I really think that there has to be some ability to control these deals on these younger players that is not in place right now, because you're going to have some of the star players in this game. I mean, thankfully the Leafs got Matthews signed, the Oilers got McDavid signed, but you're talking, Marner, Point. These are major players in this league, and if they sit out a month, 2 months.
Well, I'll bring up the one point that I brought up yesterday, and we'll see what Jan thinks. But Jan, end of the day, if players are partners with the owners, just Austin Matthews showing up to do an interview, like with Mike said, a Clark Gable mustache, isn't enough to drive extra revenue to make the salary cap go up. At some point, the players have to kick in here, too, and come in with some ideas at the table to help everybody else make more money. It's always at the feet of the owners.
I agree with you, right? So, I mean, well, first of all, that ad campaign was wolf bad. I mean, I'm not sure. Whoever came up with that ad campaign should be fired, tarred, feathered, quartered, and sent away somewhere and not brought back for several years, because it was pretty bad, right? But at least it showed a mild amount of initiative to try to think off the beaten path, right? So, look, the core fan is always going to be the core fan, and we've talked about this a lot, right? The point of growing the game is expanding the remit and the reach to beyond the core fan, because we're going to watch probably regardless. I mean, the thing that we've shown is that if people go to watch games in person, they will get hooked, right? If you look at all the football players that go watch games, they remark at how amazing it is to watch it from skilled athlete to skilled athlete, recognizing just how good it is, right? So the ad campaigns that highlight the speed and the skill that these players have is great. So the problem is, though, as we've all talked about, and Russ, you know as well as I do, Mike, you know a little bit, being in New York and going to MSG, they have priced out, for the most part, the average fan. The only way you're going to grow the game is finding a way to get the average fan to get them hooked on going to live action, and therefore be more willing to watch it on TV because they've now gotten hooked by being at a live event.
Yeah,
well, you're going to have a hard time at times growing the game based upon the way you're viewing it now.
I don't think they've priced out the average fan. What they've done is they've outpriced the average fan if they want to go to 5 to 7 games. If you're going for one night out, they haven't priced you out.
Well, maybe I still think that some of the pricing is again. If you want to try to grow the game, you try to grow it from a grassroots perspective and build it up that way, right? And
let's just say this: they priced out the fan who wants to go to a game and not sit in Nebraska. If you're going to a game at Scotiabank Arena and you want to sit within 20 rows of the ice in the platinums or the golds, you're spending anywhere from $250 to $500 Canadian. It's obscene. I couldn't afford it. A lot of people can't afford it. That's why a lot of Toronto fans go to Detroit, go to Pittsburgh, go to Buffalo, because they can drive down, get a hotel, go out to dinner, and buy tickets and spend less than they do on a pair of tickets at the arena.
What Jan's saying is nice, but really from the Rangers' perspective, and the Islanders are certainly different, but from the Rangers' perspective, they're looking to capture the office that wants to go out to the one game.
That's fine, right? You can have after. You have to find a way to have both, though, don't you?
I mean, do they? Right now, they don't really have an attendance problem, so I guess they don't.
Well, no, hold on. That's apples and oranges, right? We're talking two different things here, right? We're talking about beyond. You can have both, right? So we're trying to grow the game. I mean, if you can still be pandering and trying to get the big business. That doesn't mean you cannot necessarily get individuals who can't afford it necessarily. That's my point.
I'm saying, if you're a team that, like the Leafs, do the Leafs care about growing the game? Not really, because
it has to be a league-wide initiative. That's my point here, right? You have to go beyond just the individual team.
You don't have to grow
the league.
Yeah, you don't have to grow the game in Southern Ontario. It's
no.
90% of the fan base there wants to go to games, and if they go to games, they see one of the best broadcasts you can see on Hockey Night in Canada or Sports TSN. So it's even hockey cities like Buffalo, I don't think you have to worry about. I think you have to worry about these markets like Carolina, like Florida, where I think that
we wish all the people in Carolina well right now while they're getting pounded, by the way.
But where the game has been successful when they win, when they get to the finals or when they win a Stanley Cup. But when they're an also-ran, when they're a mediocre team, there's 8,000 people in the stands. I mean, how many Tuesday night games have you watched from Sunrise where there's no fans in the lower sections and all of them are sitting up in the cheap seats?
Although baseball is no different. Like, UC game yesterday, they were graveyards.
Well, again, if you guys haven't followed it, I think it's Empty Seats is the Twitter account, and he has always pictures sent to him in terms of what the ballparks and arenas look like, and in terms of how many empty seats are located. It's pretty stark. I mean, take a look at it. He has a ton every single day, but that, unfortunately, with teams that are out of it, that's what's going to happen. I mean, look, the Mets also. That's why part of the reason why I gave up my Mets seats this year is I got tired of I couldn't afford it anymore to lose the money I was losing. Even with my Jet seats. I mean, my seats, I was getting more at the end of the last 2 months of the season for my parking pass than I was getting for the tickets, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, that is ridiculous. But I get what you're saying. And
that's just ideas. I mean, look, I agree with you. They if they're going to they need to find a way to grow the game. But also, I don't think NHL is in a good state in terms of the interest level in the game. I think there were ways to hopefully try to make it better and improve it to expand the remit and the reach of the game to get more people.
I will say this. I think they have grown the game for the cord cutters out there. I think they've done a nice job with that and keeping those people plugged in. Because obviously, if you're a Comcast or whatever, you're watching hockey. You have no choice. It's coming on your television. But I think they've done a good job reaching out to the cord cutters and everything else. they do have the best gate of most of the sports. So it's only needs to be improved in certain market. But again, could it be improved? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and one note to the NHL, if you're because I do like the Game Center Live, I do like the Center Ice package, but I can't get Game Center Live. I can't buy Game Center Live if I'm going to watch games and the broadcast is a minute to a minute and a half behind the live action.
That's a huge issue, but it's all, unfortunately, Mike, it's every single sport. So, for example, I have DirecTV. Right, DirecTV is a good 30 seconds almost behind the broadcast. The same thing if you're watching even on the NHL on if I watch the At Bat app, right? So if I watch an away game, right, on my MLB app, it's also well behind. And if I'm listening to the game on radio compared to live action, I can hear the event on my radio, as long as it's not satellite radio, right? So satellite's also delayed. But if I have my regular radio on in the house, so I will listen to something happening, and then if I'm not watching, I'll go run downstairs and turn the TV because I know there's a delay, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, the Game 7 of the first round, San Jose and Vegas, I found out the game-winning goal on Twitter literally 35 seconds before.
Yeah,
I did. So Rangers Capitals, Game 7, 2015, Stepan's goal.
Yeah,
I think I told people I was up in Boston, so I had a meeting with the Fed the next day. And I'm watching from a hotel room. It doesn't have NBC Sports, and I wasn't about to roam around Boston to try to find a bar that had it. So I'm watching it on the app on my iPad while following the Twitter account on my phone and see the goal come across the phone. And then finally, about a minute later, the goal scored on my app where I actually get caught up to see what happened, which is kind of crazy if you think about it.
I'll tell you the other thing you won't be roaming around Boston for, it's pizza. You won't be looking for good pizza either.
That is true.
Ty was looking for deep dish pizza, but Boston's the wrong place to do it. Chicago, okay.
Yeah, I tried to tell him, like, dude, you're in the wrong town for pizza.
I'm still hankering for, was it Giordano's? That place, phenomenal. Okay, some other news, some contract news. One we pretty much expected. Joe Thornton re-ups with the San Jose Sharks, 1 year, $2 million, no bonuses, no performance bonuses, flat salary. Thornton had 51 points in 73 games last year, 16 goals, 35 assists.
Not much better than Marleau. I mean, honestly, comparable numbers.
More assists, though. Marleau, I think.
Always going to have more assists. I mean,
right, he's a center, and he's a great playmaker. But he also had 10 points in the playoffs, played pretty well. 40 years old. I mean, he's slow as sin now, but he still can. He's a big body, and you can survive in the NHL like Dave Andreychuk did into his late 30s with the reach, with his veteran savvy. The money isn't that much. I think it's a good signing for the Sharks, and not something I thought wasn't going to happen. But what do you think?
It is, but it's interesting now that they chose him over Marleau. That to me is the interesting part, because that's
no, because I think as a third line center, which is I think what you're going to use Thornton as, he still has some value. I don't think. I mean, Mike, you can attest better than I can since you saw him more than I did in Toronto. I'm not sure how much Marleau has left in the tank, and you would have to probably use him on the third line there. Also, I'm not quite sure that's a good fit for him as well.
I think Marleau has something left in the tank. I don't know whether for a team that has Stanley Cup aspirations, he would be anything more than a third or fourth liner on the Sharks. They have a lot of good young players, guys like LeBanc, guys like Hurdle. They're.
Right. But Mike, we did talk about it off air. If Marleau didn't play the amount of minutes that he was playing with the Leafs, he probably could have been more effective.
That's a symptom of Babcock, because Babcock is always comfortable with his veteran guys. He trusts them more than some of the youngsters.
Yeah,
and there's Patrick Marleau had no business playing as many minutes as Austin Matthews did in the third period of Game 7, and I think that's a function of Babcock, but. I think he could have helped somebody, and it's a question of whether, Marleau is going to go someplace else to play another year. I'm skeptical. I think he's probably, if he doesn't get San Jose, I don't, we talked about this yesterday. I don't know how far he's going to go to play another season, how far away from his family. He's made a lot of money in his career. I know he probably wants to keep continuing because he can still play, but I'm not sure if he's going to have the chance. Now,
by the way, an under the radar story, and I'm not sure it still exists, but I think the officials still haven't been signed for the year.
Nope, they have not. There was an article yesterday written that they haven't been signed yet either.
They have not. And I saw a little.
Well, that's under the radar, isn't it?
It is under the radar. And the thing is, and I don't know if one has to do with the other, but there was an announcement. I think Elliot Friedman retweeted it, that there were going to be 4 female officials participating in some of the rookie tournaments.
I think that's great. If they're faster than the guys, fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I think that's half the battle is keeping up with the play.
Now, is that because that they're trying to get women into officiating, or is it because some of these officials that don't have contracts are not participating in these tournaments?
I think it's both of those things. Yeah. And again, I don't care who the person is. Whoever the fastest and most detail-oriented person is, that's what I want.
I could care less. Yeah. Now, one last thing on Marlowe. Do you think that they signed Thornton over Marlowe because Thornton's got more left in the tank, or do you think they signed Thornton instead of Marlowe because Thornton stayed and Marlowe didn't?
I think that's why.
I don't think they look. I mean, they weren't going to pay Marlowe what Marlowe wanted, also, right? So
but he would take the $2 million, I think.
No. In terms of in the past, right? They weren't giving him that kind of contract to stay in.
Right. They were giving him $2 million.
Thornton took a quote unquote hometown discount to kind of stay.
Right. They were giving him 2 years. That's all.
No, but I think Mike has a good point. I think ultimately, the fact that he's a center, but also the fact that he never left weighed in his favor.
Now, the other signing that was made late yesterday. I'm a little questionable on Riley Sheehan signing a 1-year deal with the Oilers. We know Riley Sheehan had that year with Detroit a few years ago where he didn't score until, I think, game week 81. I think he had two goals, and he had them in the last 2 games. He got traded a couple times last year to Pittsburgh, then to Florida. I believe it was $800,000. I think it was something close. It was less than $1 million.
It's worth it for that.
Yeah.
Because he is a good skater and a good passer. At the end of the day, the guy has good vision, so you hope he can get some points. You're not looking for Riley Sheehan for goals anyhow. You're really not. You're just looking for some decent minutes, win a few faceoffs, make some plays happen. He might be able to do that there. But again, he is going to take the spot of a possible younger player that may have a chance to emerge on the team, like a Benson or someone like that.
Right.
And that's the part now where I think Ken Holland is caught in the middle because he didn't want to say they weren't going to contend this year. So now he has to sort of mix in more veterans, and I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think Ian's a bad signing. I just don't think it's a good idea to have to do that.
I mean, Jan, right now, looking at Cap Central and looking at all the players that are in their final year of their contracts or signed to 1-year deals, the Edmonton Oilers have 8 unrestricted free agent forwards at the end of this year.
Well, good ones?
Yeah, Gagne, Cassian, Granlund, Brodziak, Archibald, Joachim Nygaard, Sheehan, and Thomas Yurko. These are all hole pluggers. They're all, to a greater or lesser extent. I mean, Gagne used to be a good player. I don't know if he is anymore. But these guys are all hole pluggers, maybe buying time for guys like Kailer Yamamoto. And, I don't think Puljujärvi, because I think Puljujärvi's gone wherever, he's not going to play for Edmonton anymore. But, I mean, it's a good signing, but it's the state of this organization that Riley Sheehan might be on their 3rd line. That's how bad they are right now.
I think he will be on their 3rd line. I don't think there's kind of any question that he will be on their 3rd line right now. And agree with you. I mean, you have the big 2 in 2+, let's say. Obviously, you have Draisaitl and Cleveland McDavid, right? You have Nugent Hopkins signed for this year and next year. You've taken on the Neal contract as a way to get rid of the Lucic contract. Mm-hmm. Defensively, I mean, Klefbom, I think he's got more in the tank than what he's shown. Nursely showed some signs of taking that step forward last year when he had to pick up when Klefbom is out. We all know about the Larson trade for Hall. We know what we think about Russell. So if you look at what's exists on this team right now and what's coming up, you better hope that guys like Bouchard and Broberg come quickly to help your defense, because if not, you're going to have the top 2 stars and then not a whole heck of a lot behind it with very little to show in terms of what you've gotten out of your draft picks over the last several years.
I mean, Bouchard will be there. Broberg won't come that quickly because he's just learning the position. So I don't think they can rush him along.
Yeah, Funky Cold Zadina and drop the elbow in the chatter saying Holland will totally go after and sign Thomas Vanek. And we mentioned that a week or so ago, and the fact that Vanek probably wouldn't have a problem signing in Edmonton because he signed an offer sheet with them 11 years ago, so he showed a willingness to go there. But he's so slow now that, I mean, it's similar, and I think he's got more in the tank than Lucic does. But he's as slow as Lucic. And
I would say this: Holland's working this the same way that Lou Lamoriello worked and is working the Islanders. Now, if all of a sudden there's a new agreement here and nobody opts out and we got like 3 years of labor peace, some of these guys with 1 year deals might get decent extensions. If for some reason the players don't come through here on the 15th, all these guys are getting signed to 1 year deals or nothing.
Now, a couple
uncertainty. So that's sort of where Edmonton is at right now. And yeah, the young guys, they don't have enough of them to get them out of it.
And somebody in the chat, Mark Peterson in the chat was saying, Chris Russell's the next one to go. What general manager is stupid enough to take Chris Russell? That's what
it only takes one, Mike, as we've seen.
I know, but I mean, you're talking about right now a guy who's making $4 million for this year and next year, and he simply can't move anymore.
Mike, even though Adam McQuaid is just skating with the Bruins,
yes,
don't tell me there's not a possibility.
Stats for Adam McQuaid.
Siri was going to give me.
Siri didn't like that answer.
Siri, I don't need them. I already know them. But the interesting thing is, with Adam McQuaid there hanging around, listen, if all of a sudden their top pairing is missing to start the season, it's possible he gets signed on just to have an extra guy.
Now we're gonna talk Bruins team preview in a minute, but I wanted to touch on the rookie tournaments that are going on throughout the country right now. There's a big 8-team tournament in Traverse City, Michigan, that the Leafs are taking part in for the first time. There's one here in Buffalo. I'm going to go to see the Bruins and the Penguins this afternoon. Devils and Sabres are also participating, so there's a series of games this week.
I may be missing mine. Mine is next week, next Wednesday. But in an odd situation, so we had a softball playoff the other day, and we're out there and it starts to rain. So they're like, well, wait it out. Okay, it slows down. Go back out there and it starts pouring again. They're like, forget it. We cancel it. And so now my makeup is on that day. So we'll see.
Well, but the point I was going to make about with some of these tournaments, I mean, we're going to see Jack Hughes here for the Devils. It'll be the third year in a row that the Buffalo Prospect Challenge will have the number 1 pick, as Heischer was here 2 years ago, Dahlin last year, and now Hughes this year. But are we getting like the NFL here, Russ, where, the Leafs are not sending Sandin, Liljegren, or Bracco. The Sabres are not playing a Luukkonen or Cousins. Now
Cousins is playing now.
No, he's not that I've heard.
I believe yesterday they said he's available.
Okay, well if that's the case, then but he was not on their roster a few days ago. If he can play, that'll be great that's their number 1 pick. And now remember, he hurt his thumb in the rookie development.
Yeah, but I told you how he looked. He's fine.
Yeah, but Luukkonen's coming off hip surgery, so
yeah.
They're not. I understand them not rushing players that are coming off of surgeries, but I also
think Cousins is in tonight, Mike.
Okay, good. Well, of course I'll miss him because I'm bowling.
Why are you missing him tonight, Mike?
I just said because I'm bowling.
Oh, you did say that. Okay.
Yeah, because hey, if you can admit that you're missing a prospect challenge for softball, I can say I missed it for bowling.
This is the playoffs. You're talking about your first bowling game of the year. It's a little different.
I made a commitment, Russ. I'm sorry. I made a commitment. But I mean, you were talking about you were going to write something for Sportsology about the Calder, possible Calder finalists, and I mean one of the benefits
of 6 that I feel really good about.
Yeah, one of the benefits to these rookie tournaments is getting that first look at these players. I mean, I'm sure anybody going to the tournament that the Rangers are participating in, they're going to want to see Capo Caco.
Yeah.
And Kravtsov, and Fox, and just there's a handful of guys. So it's not
I didn't look at the roster for Traverse, but I imagine most of them are in there.
What's that?
I didn't see the Traverse roster, but I imagine most of them are.
No. Again, that's why I'm pointing it out. They are. Fox is playing. Henriksen's playing, who drafted in the 3rd round this year. Kako's obviously playing. Kravtsov is playing. Shesterkin is playing. Yegor Rykov is playing. Ruunanen is playing. So there's a lot of guys that they're going to want to see this year. I mean, there's the big 3 or 4 that most of us feel have a pretty good shot at breaking camp with the team. But there's definitely others that people are going to look at.
I think Henriksen's one of the others right now, but he really is a talented player who's like probably a third line center, but a very talented third line guy. Like, I think he can really do something. The interesting thing about Fox is there's still so much like, well, we don't know what he could do in the NHL. And it's like, I think if you've watched him at all and you've watched him in international play, playing against the best talent of his age group and having him shine the way he did, I don't think there should be much question about Adam Fox. I have zero question about Adam Fox, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm anxious I'm anxious to see. I would assume he's going to make the Rangers lineup.
Oh yeah, I think he's going to make it.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple other notes, and we'll talk about the Bruins. David Pagnotta, the fourth period, reported Jake Gardiner and his camp are working on options. Heard 4 teams have made offers for his services, all varying in term and dollars. Montreal is believed to be one of the teams with a multi-year deal on the table. Still unclear when a decision will be made. Russ, I know that his former teammate Morgan Riley came out and said, I didn't expect this to happen. Basically saying he expected him to be signed July 1st, and now we're at September 6th, and he's still unsigned. I don't think he's getting any more than a 2-year deal. When they say
no, I don't think so either, but I think he's clearly waiting until the 11th hour on the Leafs. I think he is doing what Anton Strawman did with the Rangers, and he had to make a quick decision in the end. Like he divulged this year, 45 minutes, he had to choose between 2 teams. I think Jake Gardiner is going to make a similar decision because he's still hopeful that he can go back to the Leafs because clearly that's his number one choice. When that doesn't happen, then I think he will make a decision, but I don't know what day that'll be. Will that be the day that Mitch Marner signs? Will that be the day that he is tired of waiting on Mitch Marner? I don't know.
Yeah, it's not happening with Toronto. I mean, that's
but in his mind.
I know that may be what he's hoping, but honestly, if Marner gets what supposedly Marner is looking for or something close to that, the Leafs have no room to sign him. They would have to trade somebody, trade a Kapanen or a Janssen or a Cody Ceci to make room for him, and I just don't see that happening. So. I think if he's smart, he signs the deal with one of the 4 teams before training camps next week. But I don't know.
I mean, now you can't trade Nylander because he's an integral part of the NHL's marketing program.
Oh yeah. He's the poster child for the league.
He's actually the poster child for either. He looks more like an author than I do.
He's a poster child. He looks like John Lennon with the round glasses. We got Austin Matthews who looks like Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind, and William Nylander looks like he's singing Imagine. He just needs to sit at the piano. Okay, the Boston Bruins got to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, 49-24-9. They were very fortunate with the upsets of the top rated teams in the East, Tampa Bay falling. But they earned it. They got to the final. They fought hard against St. Louis, but losing 7 games. They come back with essentially the same team, Russ. They didn't make many changes. Where the uncertainty is what we were talking about before, the signing of or the lack of signing of McAvoy or Carlo to their new contracts. They lose Noel Achari. And they add some role players like Brett Ritchie, but pretty much this is the same team. And I think, unless there's a dramatic fall with key players like Bergeron or Krejci, they're going to be in contention like they were this year. I
mean, I think the biggest blow to them was David Backes saying that he'd be back, because I think there were some that were hoping that he wouldn't, and they would LTIR him. So that's still muddies up the offense a little, although he's their enforcer now, so I guess it's not that big of a deal. The blue line's in a horrific shape, because if you have your top pairing holding out, then you're going to have Torrey Krug and Chara as your top pair.
Right.
And you don't want to start the season like that. You don't want to have to do that. Now, Mike and I talked about it, and I do think Vakanainen would be one of the guys that would play, because I thought he played really well last year until he got concussed. And so I think that was a situation where he showed he could definitely fill in. They could get by, but I think the Bruins have to start out hot, and I have a feeling they're going to have a bit of a playoff hangover.
Yeah.
Now, the Tuukka Rask haters have to shut up, because he did great. There is no goalie controversy. There won't be a goalie controversy this year, so that's a positive. They do look like a playoff team, but I can't say they're definitely in if they don't have their top pair for any length of time, because what if they don't have those guys for a month? They could start out, with a bad record, and it would be hard to dig out. And so I can't give that an automatic guarantee just yet.
Jan, what's your view on the Bruins?
Offensively, you obviously have the big three. We saw DeBrusk last year takes a step forward. Krejci had a rebound year. I think the big thing that I think many of us expect is with Coyle there, that really provides some additional depth that might have been lacking. And it's be interesting to see if Anders Bjork kind of plays like he did early last year, or is the regression we saw last year as the season went on, just the nature of him acclimating to the league. And then you also look at Heinen, who's one of those guys who I think is an unsung type of player, and Corrali as well. So up front, you think they'd be fine. Russ talked about the goaltending. I mean, Halak was very good stepping in for Rask last year when he struggled early on, and it gave Cassidy a nice little 1-2 duo where that Rask didn't necessarily have to be overworked, which I think kept him fresher for the playoffs. And I wouldn't be surprised if you see something similar in terms of workload this year, just to make sure that Rask is ready for the stretch run. But the big key is going to be what happens on defense. If they don't get McAvoy and Carlos signed, and they ended up necessarily holding out or don't necessarily report right away, as Russ said, there could be a downstream impact in terms of the record. But to me, what's key is that as long as they don't finish too far back, once they get those guys back, it's going to be full steam forward. And we look at a big four of McAvoy, Chara, Krug, and Carlo. It's a pretty darn good 1 through 4, and then your 5 and 6 get filled out. So I don't think Boston has a ton of weaknesses. They just happen to be in a somewhat difficult conference or division with Toronto there as well. So I think right now you would expect Toronto and Boston to kind of be battling it out for 1-2 within the division, and the other teams kind of falling maybe a little bit behind them.
Well, I think they're going to be a little behind Tampa, because I expect Tampa
as well. Sorry, you're right. Tampa as well. Right.
And,
so probably one, but those two guys are 2-3, and we're going to finally have another. You're probably looking at another first round matchup, like we did last year. Or if not, let's say Toronto takes a step forward. Tampa Boston could be really interesting as a first round match.
I don't think Florida can be ignored, but I get your point. And the one thing I in looking at the Bruins and their depth chart, and their prospects coming through that I'm going to see later on this afternoon, they've got guys who might be on the cusp of making the NHL. And I'm not saying they're going to be impact players, but Studnicka, Frederick, Stanishin, Anders Bjork, that's just a forward. The defenseman Vakanainen. I mean, they've got a good bevy of prospects. So this is a team that at certain areas is a little long in the tooth, but they have young players coming.
Well, they do. But again, you take away any team's top pairing, and now all of a sudden I got to put 20 minutes a night on Chara.
Sure,
we got a problem.
Right. They can't do that for 30, 40 games and expect him. I mean, he's 40. What is he? 6,000 years old. So you can't depend.
I mean, he's not as old as Mel Brooks, but he's getting there.
Jeez. Okay. We'll take some questions in the chat here. Russ, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, or any?
The only thing I would say is if the chat room wants to guess, I've got 6 players as my preseason Calder favorites. If they want to guess, I'll name 3 of them that are right. So a couple will be obvious, but we'll see if they can guess them all.
Okay. Let's go to some questions here. Drop the Elbow asks, is Jakub Zboril officially a bust? Never hear talk of him on the Bruins as a prospect anymore. Well, he played in the AHL last year, and he played a couple games with the Bruins, so he's not completely off the radar, but he has been a bit of a disappointment, Russ.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I didn't love him in the draft. Still doesn't have great speed. It's maybe good enough for the NHL. His offensive ability is nothing now. I mean, it really is. It's nil. He'll be a puck moving extra defenseman if he makes it at all. We'll see. Never want to count a guy out, but it doesn't look great.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely behind Vakanainen when it comes to their depth chart in terms of calling up players. And they signed Alex Petrovic to a PTO, and they might sign McQuaid to a PTO. And if that's a sort of a commentary on what they think they have behind Vakanainen, that means that they're looking for veteran plugs.
Yeah.
And it makes them passing on Barzal and Connor in that draft look even worse.
I mean, but they're past that. Like, what are you going to do?
No, I'm just saying is you look at this team, right? And We mark how good the team is now. Can you imagine if suspending belief, right? If they had made those picks, what this team would be like?
Yeah, no, it's fair.
Julian Filion asks, Russ, I heard Joel Bouchard say that Ryan Poehling and Nick Suzuki should play in the AHL first.
I mean, I agree with Suzuki. I did a very long interview and got to see Poehling up close. He's really close. Not that Suzuki isn't, but Poehling is a little more physically developed, so I think the way he scores goals might be okay. And so I'm just in the situation where I think you got to give Poehling a really long look. I think Suzuki, you want him to have a year to get physically stronger because he's a little bit more of a finesse player, where Poehling is more of like a Kachuk kind of player, and he can go there and blow things up in the crease. Although he has a great shot and does have some dangle in his game, his speed looks really good right now. He is really close. So I may disagree with Joel. But again, nobody's ever going to be hurt by going to the AHL. So if they both go there, it's not a bad thing.
I mean, you got to remember, Poehling scored, and I know it was a meaningless game.
Yeah.
He scored a hat trick in his first game in the last season against Toronto. I would at least, unless he plays really badly in the preseason, I would give him the 9. And I know he burned the first year with that game. I would give him 9 games. I would give him a little time, see what he does.
I think Eric Stepan scored a hat trick in his first game too.
Right. I mean,
he did against Buffalo.
Well, that doesn't count. At that point, Buffalo is not.
That doesn't count. Okay. Revisionist history from Mike Agello.
Crazy, yeah. Who would have thought?
Yeah, shocking. I'm a history major. It's
amazing.
If Boston drafted Barzal, they could have won the cup this year. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's
I'm just remarking. I know there's been a lot written about it. You just look at, obviously you never know how things are going to pan out, but it's just very interesting, especially the bracketing of who went right afterwards and what they became.
Right.
Yeah.
Funky Cold Zadina asks, if the Red Wings get off to an awful start like last year, do you think Yzerman will fire Jeff Blashill and replace him with Bilesma for the rest of the season? Because I think Bilesma is an assistant coach there.
No, I think.
What's the expectations for Detroit this year? I think they'll be a little better, but I don't think any of us think they're a remote contender to be a playoff team right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're a contender to be last overall, and what they've done in the offseason doesn't dissuade me from that. It looks like that they're tanking.
Yeah, so, I think Blashill's stay for the entire season because there's no expectation. So why would you fire the guy?
Right. Last question.
I couldn't quite hear. Serious, just really, you're out of control, series. Shut up.
Wow. Slap her down.
No.
I'm joking, folks. Steve James asks, Mike, what are your thoughts on a Marner trade? Try Bracco with Matthews, drop Nylander down with JT, leaves room to add other key pieces. I don't think that they're going to trade Marner. I think eventually Marner will agree to a 3-year bridge, which has been more rumored over the last week or so. I don't think it'll be $9.5 million, which is must be a leak from the Darren Ferris management, because that would be double the amount of the highest paid bridge deal in the history of the league, which was Kucherov. I don't think Kyle Dubas hesitates to set precedent, but even that is insane. I think he'll end up probably signing a 3-year deal for probably 8.5, something in that range. And that's still a little putrid because that's big money for not a lot of security, but I think they don't want Marner to sit out. I don't think there's really a chance that they're going to trade him, other than if he goes into the regular season and it's still acrimonious, where they're one side is from Mars and the other side is from Venus.
Yeah. Then
I think they'll say, okay, what are you guys offering? Meaning teams interested in Marner, and they'll listen. But I don't think they're going to actively shop Marner because
he's not getting traded. I do think he's going to get the contract you say, and I think the only addition will be he'll get a keys to the executive washroom and a 10% discount card at Canadian Tire.
If he gets $8.5 million, he doesn't need a discount card. Now, okay, Randy, our Flamester says, is Zadina on the Calder list?
He is not.
Okay.
He had a decent year last year. I just think some of these guys will come in a little hotter than he will.
Can I guess?
Yeah, well, Funky has is Sam Steele.
Sam Steele is not.
Wow.
I like Sam Steele. He'd probably be the next guy. He'd probably be the
I got 3 of them off the top of the head, which should be pretty easy. So
yeah, 3 are very easy.
Go ahead, Jim.
Obviously, Jack Hughes, Kako, right, and it could be Quinn Hughes as well, right?
Those are the no-brainers.
Right. Those are the 3 no-brainers, right? I thought you might have had Steele, who I think is going to be a second-line player in Anaheim.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's going to be the number 2 center behind Getzlaf. So yeah, I mean, we'll save the rest of it.
You have a Red Wings player.
Okay.
But it's not Zadina. So Funky Cold Zadina, you should have gotten it.
Bardicus 1 says Batherson should be on the list.
No, he's not on the list. He's a good player, though.
Yes, he is a good player.
Well, the other one is pretty easy. It's obviously Makar, right? That's pretty simple.
Yep.
We'll say Funky says Roenick.
No. I like Roenick, though. Roenick is a good player, but no.
We'll save the rest for your article. You can look at Sportsology later on in the day for us to post it. We will be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. Thank you to Jan Levine for Russ Cohen. I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.